I'm Callum Bagnall. I'm a student at Fanshawe, but I also was a drug addict for a while, and I did end up being addicted to safe supply drugs. For a while I was taking Percocets, Oxys, but then it got too expensive around 2021. In that time, I got connected with somebody through a job who lived at a one of those buildings where they have post-homeless people. They were able to live in this building with income-geared rent. He told me, hey, in this new building I'm living in, there's loads of people that are on these safe supply drugs. At first I didn't believe it. I was like, there's no way that on that scale people are getting hundreds of pills a day or close to 100 pills a day. I got numbers and contacts for safe supply pills, and I was able to pick up safe supply drugs much cheaper than Oxys or Percocets. It would cost me, only $1.50 to $1 or less sometimes a pill, all at once too. I could pick up 100 of them or 150 at a time, and then I could last throughout the week. Whereas with Oxys and Percocets, it was way too expensive. I was spending $5 a pill or more sometimes. It was like almost like a dream for a drug addict. I would have already been at the end of my road and have gone to rehab at that point if safe supply drugs weren't so cheap and available. With the small amount of money I was making, I was able to afford hundreds of safe supply pills a week because of how cheap they were. I went straight to the source, straight to the places where people have their prescriptions. If I had to guess, just like a round number, definitely thousands, probably more than 5,000. All I had to do was either call my friend and get him to, contact one of the people in the building, or I could just show up. If he wasn't there, I could call somebody if I already had their number, or I could knock on doors on different units and ask, hey, do you know somebody who's getting safe supply drugs? I would buy more than just the Dilaudids. I would buy usually around 50 to 80 Dilaudids, plus another 20 to 40 of the 100 milligram XR Acadians, and maybe another 10 to 5 of the 100 milligram XR Dilaudids. All the pills that I was seeing that went through my hands, first of all, they came in a pill bottle with the label on it. Usually the people I was buying them from would try to scratch out the doctor's name or their name. They were kind of paranoid about that, but sometimes they would just give it to me with the label, unripped, not covered with marker or anything. It was just a clean label. Every week that I would get it from the ones that didn't rip off the label, it would be the same doctor, same amounts, sometimes more. I'd seen counterfeit Percocets before when I was doing Percocets and Oxys, and you can tell the quality of a pharmacy company produced pill versus one that's pressed in a pill press in somebody's garage. Usually the ones that are pressed in somebody's garage are either packed too tightly or too loosely, so you either can't break it apart, or if you do touch it, it just breaks apart by itself. Usually the lettering is not the same, it's all chalky or broken up, but these ones, they were all standardized, they all looked the same, they all had the same logo, same size, same weight. They all had pharmacy quality, touch, feel. A lot of them would give away their pills to dealers or trade them. So if I came over on a Thursday and it had already been a couple days since they picked up their pills, I would be, out of luck. I ended up taking so many pills that even though it was extremely cheap to get safe supply drugs, it was so expensive that I couldn't afford it given the amount that I was taking. And I probably wouldn't have gone that far down the rabbit hole if they weren't so available and they weren't so cheap. I saw how much it was hurting my family, my addiction, and they convinced me to go to rehab.
Going to rehab was a great day, but it was also, a scary day. I go in and I know that it's better to check what's in the room because it's his room, but there could be things that could tempt him when he comes back from rehab. I go in there and I start cleaning the room, and as I'm going through backpacks and drawers and stuff, I find these pill bottles. Callum had purchased them in Safe Supply. They were in his room and I was shocked. I must have taken like a half a dozen bottles, and it was sort of a sad experience to see that. But it made me aware that if I'm going through this, how many other people in my community are going through this as well? Were they as lucky as me? My son was in rehab the day that I was doing this.
I do believe that safe supply diversion is a common occurrence in London because my patients tell me, and then we also have them coming into the clinic with hydromorphone in their urine, which is tested every time they come into the clinic, and when asked, they say, oh, I bought it off someone on safe supply, or I went down to the pharmacy where they're doing safe supply and I got it off someone there. Personally, I have about 400 patients between London and St. Thomas, and I would say roughly half of them, so about 200 of those patients have told me that they have bought or they know somebody who has bought diverted safe supply Dilaudid 8 milligram for approximately $1 a pill. It's greatly impacted addiction care in the area because many of them have fallen off the rails. They're now able to buy Dilaudid quite inexpensively, and it's readily available on every street corner here in London. So some of them have stayed on the program. They're still on their Sublocade or their methadone, their Suboxone, but we've seen a dramatic decrease in the number of patients that attend our clinics for treatment because they've gotten onto safe supply or they know somebody on safe supply and they're buying off of them. Many of our patients have been stable for years. They just have to come to see the doctor once a month and they go to the pharmacy every week to pick up their caries. You know, they're trying to live their life. They're back at work. They got their kids back. They have housing. And unfortunately, if safe supply is also dispensed from the same pharmacy, then those patients are there and they're diverting their Dilaudid right there at the door. And so it's in their face, and many of them have left our clinic and went to other clinics because they just didn't want to be bombarded with these drug dealers trying to sell their Dilaudid to them. You just have to look around. It's definitely not a myth. It's not working. It's not helping. A lot of these patients still have fentanyl in their urine, even though the safe supply is supposed to replace toxic fentanyl, but they're still using. And the safe supply supporters are saying, well, they're cutting down. There's no way to know that they're cutting down. You're going based on their word. There's no way to quantify that in their urine. It is known in the addiction world that urine testing is not effective at catching diversion. As long as they take one Dilaudid tablet, it will show up in their urine. So there's no way to tell how much of that are they taking. If they're prescribed 40 tabs a day, there's no way to know that they're taking all 40 tabs.
The majority, like 9 out of 10 people, are diverting them. There were a few people that I met that would do a little bit of both. They would divert like 90% of their pills and keep maybe 5 to 10 out of the 70 that they get per day. If they ran out of fentanyl or they were going through withdrawals, they would tell me that they only needed a couple pills to keep the withdrawals at bay, which is insane to me that they were getting 70 pills a day, but they only needed a couple to keep the withdrawals at bay. And then they would also take 1 or 2 pills the night before they get their prescription so that it looks like it's in their system. It shows up on the urine tests, so they would use that to pass the urine test so that they would get another script the next week. I had met loads of ex-fentanyl addicts at rehab that talked about, yeah man, like, you know, I saw those safe supply pills, I heard you were on them, you know, and that's why you're here. I used to sell them myself, or I had loads of friends that would sell them, or it's crazy how much there is out there. So they all knew about it.
The safe supply space right now has zero regulation in terms of the college stepping in. I work in chronic pain. My patients, when I prescribe opioids, I'm limited by chronic pain guidelines, where there's limits set on how much opioid they can get, how much they can get at a time, etc. There's certain tools we have to use to prove that their opioid prescriptions are justified. If you go past these guidelines regularly and excessively, you have to go, you're put in front of a disciplinary committee, etc. But for safe supply, there is no regulation right now. The college isn't stepping in and creating guidelines in terms of limits of dose, how many tablets they can get, what's required in terms of their urine, follow-up, you know, getting collateral information. Does a patient even use fentanyl? I know people on the safe supply program that have never even used fentanyl. And that's the whole point of the program, is to get them off the fentanyl. So they're just lining up and getting a bunch of Dilaudid really for no reason.
Eventually I did find indications of criminal organizations moving these pills. I had personally met dealers that were higher up in the supply chain where they were picking up, kilos of cocaine that were saying, hey, if you know people with Safe Supply drugs, give me their number, get their prescription for me, give it to me, I'll pay you for it. I'll buy them in bulk because I want to drive it somewhere else, like I'm going to drive it to Thunder Bay or to Sudbury so I can sell it for a profit. If you're not addicted to these pills but you want to make a profit off of them, you could just every week pick up, if you're going through 2 or 3 different people with Safe Supply prescriptions, you could get 400, 500, 600 pills a week from these guys. If you build it up for a couple weeks, take a trip up to Thunder Bay or drive up to Sudbury, you could stay in a motel and you could sell them for, instead of selling it for $2 a pill or $5 a pill like it would, most people would be getting in London, you could sell it for $30 a pill or $20 a pill. And you could sell them in bulk too, because up in Thunder Bay and Sudbury, they don't have as many clinics, Safe Supply clinics, as we do.
The pharmacist would profit from all of those prescriptions, usually, at least 1 to 3 prescriptions. They get a witness fee, plus they also get a dispense fee for each patient every day. Well, the dispense fee varies depending on the pharmacy. It's sort of anywhere from $8 to $12 depending on the pharmacy, but then there's a witness fee, which I've heard recently is about $16. So that's per prescription, per patient, per day. So it really adds up for them. If you have 300 or 350 patients being funneled through every day, then that is a huge profit for them. We are seeing younger and younger patients come in, unfortunately. 15, 16-year-olds coming in, and they're getting hooked on hydromorphone or Dilaudid because it's so incredibly cheap. It's cheaper than alcohol. It's only $1 a pill. They go to a friend's house or a party and it's there because it's so accessible and it's so cheap that we're seeing them getting hooked really early onto opioids, and then they're in withdrawal and then they need something to stop the withdrawal. We do get a few coming in that are there because of fentanyl use. But usually even the fentanyl users that are young, it started with Dilaudid. I've never seen 10, 15 years ago, 15, 16-year-olds coming in looking for addiction treatment, but now it's very common.
I have seen it. I've been on the ground floor. I've seen how much diversion happens. And it's almost every prescription that people are getting is being diverted to either dealers, guys like me, or other drug addicts.
Do you agree that it's possible that diverted opioids are ending up in the hands of people that they aren't prescribed to, or even children? Yes or no?
We have no evidence that they are ending up in the hands of children. We have no scientific data that supports those assertions.
I'm not going to stand up here and say that some kids, some adolescents are not accessing diverted safe supply and using diverted safe supply. Kids experiment with everything, and we need to be honest to ourselves that kids probably experiment with diverted safer supply as well.
I know I'm never going to go back and do drugs, but the recovery of my own lifestyle is very hard to picture. It's very hard to picture me being back at the same point I was years ago when I first started. I find it much harder to focus now with school. It's very hard for me to basically go about a normal day like everybody else does. I've made my peace with the emotional part of it, the hurt that I did to my family, the hurt that I did to myself, the friends that I lost along the way. They saw me in pain when I was going through withdrawals. I didn't like lying to them. I hated lying to them. Even though I was, completely broke and had no money, I would put myself in danger. And it really hurt to know the damage I was doing, the hurt I was causing. At a certain point, you start to see the pain in somebody else's eyes when they're talking to you, when you're lying to them. That was the main thing that really made me want to quit, that really helped me go to rehab, even though I was so far down the rabbit hole, was I saw how much pain it put my family through.
Seeing my son addicted to hydromorphone was a total shocker because he wasn't the same lively Callum that I knew. I felt like he was like a zombie. It was like I was living with a zombie. We all loved him. But then when he became this other Callum, I call him the other Callum, I didn't know what to say. It was like a dark cloud was over him. At one point, I just didn't let him have the car anymore because I knew he wouldn't come back with it after a while. and we were waiting to get into rehab. We were finally put on a waiting list, and unfortunately it was tough for him without any medications on board, so we had to go to a place to find medication. I said, okay, as a mom, you know, it's a tough place to be put in. You know your son shouldn't be taking medications like this, they're not good for them, but the other option would be for him to get so into withdrawal that he would have to go onto the streets and try the harder drugs. I said, okay, where do you need to go? He said, there are places where you can find medications that people actually have, and they sell their medications that they have to people like Callum. We drove to where they were located, not directly, a couple blocks away, and I stayed in the car, and Callum went and purchased what he needed. We did that a couple of times, and that was really how I got introduced to Safe Supply. Safe Supply maybe prevented him from getting fentanyl off the streets, but Safe Supply ended up getting my son addicted to opioids.
I never really realized, because of how many drugs I was doing and how deep I was in, I never realized how bad it was until after. I was in danger all the time. I get the argument. I know why the Safe Supply program was issued, to kind of draw people into the system and help them get off of drugs. But if it's not controlled correctly, if it's given out in such high doses at the beginning of every week with no controls over how much people can take and whether they're taking it or not. I take Suboxone to stay off of other drugs that I was doing before, and I have to go to the clinic every month. At first I had to go every week, and then I had to go every 2 weeks. I had to build a rapport with the clinic, and I had to show them that no, there was no other drugs in my system, and yes, I'm taking these every day. But with the Safe Supply drugs, there is no control. Once you get the pills, they're not checking to see if they've been diverted. There's no way to tell what happens to it afterwards.
We just want to see some regulation, such as witness dosing, or maybe offering the Safe Supply at the safe consumption site so that they're not leaving with the Safe Supply. I know it creates a barrier for the patient, but we witness them doing their methadone, we witness them doing their Suboxone, and this has been for decades now. I don't know why we can't witness them using their Safe Supply.
2 years of strong addiction with Safe Supply is a long time. There should be no Safe Supply. And I think the better option would be rehab. Have more clinics available and make them more available and affordable for everybody. You know, like, it was a lot of money to send Callum to rehab.
I'm not against Safe Supply in any form. I think it still has a place in the addiction world. It's a spectrum, and for those few people that have failed methadone, failed Suboxone, failed Sublocade, they cannot get to the clinic. So in those cases, Safe Supply is an option, but of course it needs to be regulated. And right now it seems to be a free-for-all, where the only ones that are really profiting from this are the pharmacists and the physicians, and the patients are destabilizing, and the Dilaudid is just keeping them in addiction.
We need to wake up. This is actually happening. Drugs are being diverted, and the Safe Supply is being abused heavily. I hope that other people in my situation, or that had been through what I had been through, feel that they can come out now, or that they could go to rehab, because it's never over. It's never over for you. You can always start again. You can always start over. Don't be afraid of telling your family. Don't be afraid of, accepting the fact that you have lost control of doing drugs. You need to stop. It's dangerous, and it needs to be controlled before it gets out of hand.